Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I'm Jawad Tehami and these are the headlines. A large number of Palestinians have attended the funeral of a teenager who was brutally killed by Israeli troops in occupied West Bank. The boy was protesting along with hundreds of Palestinians against Israeli settlements when the occupying forces shot him dead. The United Nations and the European Union have condemned the killing and told Israel to conduct an independent probe into the murder. Pakistan has rejected Indian media reports alleging Islamabad of sending foreign fighters to occupied Kashmir. The Foreign Office said India is trying to cast a shadow on Kashmiri's legitimate struggle for freedom through such fabrications. It told India to let Kashmiris exercise their right to self-determination instead of peddling fake news. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has reaffirmed his support for Indian farmers' right to hold protests. Speaking in Ottawa, he said Canada will always stand up for human rights anywhere around the world. This comes despite New Delhi's warning that Trudeau's support to farmers could damage bilateral ties. Tens of thousands have been camping on the outskirts of New Delhi to protest new agricultural laws since last week. Saudi Arabia says its allies are fully on board to resolve the Gulf diplomatic crisis with a final agreement expected soon. In an interview, Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan said the Riyadh envisions a resolution that is satisfactory to all the parties involved. Riyadh and its allies cut ties with Qatar in 2017, accusing it of backing terrorism, the charges Doha denies. The US has registered a record 225,000 COVID-19 cases overnight, with infections daily crossing 14.3 million. India's infections have topped 9.6 million, with over 36,000 new cases and 512 deaths in a day. Pakistan has reported over 3,100 cases and 44 new fatalities overnight, taking the death toll to over 8,300. Globally, the virus has claimed 1.5 million lives while infecting more than 65.8 million people. And in the English Premier League, Everton and Burnley have played a 1-1 draw at Turf Moor. The host Burnley made a lightning start with a goal in the 3rd minute by Robbie Brady, but Dominic Calvert-Lewin scored an equaliser just before the break to push Everton to the 7th spot on the table. Those are the headlines and detailed stories right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back, and now with the news in detail. Pakistan has rejected Indian media reports alleging Islamabad of sending foreign fighters to occupied Kashmir. The Foreign Office said India is trying to cast a shadow on Kashmiri's legitimate struggle for freedom through such fabrications. It said India cannot escape global condemnation for its violations of human rights in occupied Kashmir. The Foreign Office told India to let Kashmiris exercise their right to self-determination instead of peddling fake news. It added that India must respect its international legal and moral obligations. Canada's Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has reaffirmed his support for Indian farmers' right to hold protests. Speaking in Ottawa, he said Canada will always stand up for human rights anywhere around the world. Tens of thousands have been camping on the outskirts of New Delhi to protest new agricultural laws since last week. They fear the new reforms could leave them at the mercy of big corporates as they allowed the government to stop buying grain at fixed prices. Trudeau had released a video expressing concerns over a brutal police crackdown on the protesters. In response, India summoned Canada's ambassador to convey its displeasure and warned Trudeau's remarks could damage bilateral ties. Afghan President Ashraf Ghani has urged the Taliban to show their political will for peace and hold ceasefire. He was speaking at the first meeting of the High Council for the National Reconciliation.
Afghan political leaders, including Chief Executive Abdullah and former President Hamid Karzai, have attended the meeting of the presidential palace. State media said delegates stressed the need for unity and consensus among political leaders to move the Afghan peace efforts forward. Addressing the meeting, President Ashraf Ghani said that with the success of the first phase, peace negotiations have reached the second phase. Referring to the release of Taliban prisoners, Ghani said tough decisions had been made for peace and more tough decisions would be made. Meanwhile, Chief Executive Abdullah said Council represents all segments of society and the diversity of Afghanistan. He said Council will decide about the future of Kabul after consultation and fully accommodating the rightful demands of Afghans. He said war destroys the country, but peace will guarantee a future for everyone.
Saudi Arabia says its allies are fully on board to resolve the Gulf diplomatic crisis with a final agreement expected soon. In an interview, Saudi Foreign Minister Prince Faisal bin Farhan said Riyadh envisions a resolution that is satisfactory to all the parties involved. This comes amid renewed efforts by the United States and Kuwait to resolve the three-year-long crisis. Riyadh and its allies cut ties with Qatar in 2017, accusing it of backing terrorism, the charges Doha denies. The U.S. has been pushing the countries to reopen Gulf airspace for Qatari aircraft as a first step towards ending the crisis. A large number of Palestinians have attended the funeral of a teenager who was brutally killed by Israeli troops in occupied West Bank. His death drew strong condemnation from the United Nations and the European Union. 13-year-old Abu Alia was protesting along with hundreds of Palestinians against illegal Jewish settlements when Israeli troops shot him in the stomach. He later died in a hospital. Palestinian officials termed the cold-blooded murder as another war crime by the occupying forces. In a tweet, UN Special Envoy Nikolai Miladinov deplored the killing and said children must be protected from violence. The European Union also slammed Israel over its excessive use of lethal force against civilians. Both the EU and the UN have told Tel Aviv to conduct an independent investigation into the incident. Israel has occupied the West Bank since 1967. More than 450,000 Jews live in illegal settlements in the territory, home to more than 2.8 million Palestinians. The stateless Palestinians hope to create their own independent country, but the issue of Jewish settlements has long been a stumbling block in the peace process. Jordanian Foreign Minister has pressed for the independent Palestinian state in a rare meeting with his Israeli counterpart. Jordanian media says Ayman Safadi urged Israel's Gabi Ashkenazi to restart the halted negotiations with Palestinians. Safadi stressed the importance of dialogue in order to find a real solution and achieve peace. Meanwhile, in a statement, Israeli Defense Minister Benny Gantz called on Palestinians to return to the negotiating table. This came days after President Mahmoud Abbas visited Jordan as part of an Arab tour to raise support for the Palestinian cause. Bahrain will not allow the import of Israeli goods produced in settlements in occupied Palestinian territory. Bahrain state media said Commerce Minister Zayed bin Rashid Al Zaini's comments on imports from Israel have been misinterpreted. It said Commerce Ministry is committed to Bahrain's unwavering stance on its adherence to UN resolutions on Israel-Palestine conflict. Meanwhile, Palestinian Foreign Minister Riyad al-Maliki said his Bahraini counterpart Abdul Latif Al-Zaini also denied the Commerce Minister's comments. He said Manama reiterated that alleged comments totally contradict Bahrain's position of Palestinian cause. Earlier, Zaid said Manama will make no distinction between goods produced in Israel or in the occupied West Bank or Golan Heights. Iran has criticized the International Atomic Energy Agency for revealing contents of confidential report on Tehran's plan to install new centrifuges. In a tweet, Iran's envoy in Vienna said the international watchdog is responsible for protecting country's confidential safeguards information. Kazim Gharibabadi said the report appeared in media even before the IAEA's Board of Governor members could track it down. He said the watchdog should revise its confidentiality mechanisms, including using GovAtom as the safe means for communications. Meanwhile, Russia has also criticized the leaking of the report. Iran's 2015 nuclear deal allows Tehran to only use first-generation IR-1 centrifuges. The U.S. is considering to designate the Yemen's Houthi rebels group as international terrorist organization. At Bahrain summit, Oman's Foreign Minister Syed Badr al-Busaidi said the U.S. diplomat David Schenker signaled the possible blacklisting in his Muscat visit. However, Busaidi questioned the rationale of U.S. move to blockade one of the major parties in the Yemen conflict. He said bringing the warring factions to the negotiating table as outlined by the UN is optimal approach. Earlier, international media also reported that U.S. has threatened to blacklist the Houthi movement. Voting is underway in Kuwait's parliamentary elections. The elections come as the Gulf state faces its worst economic crisis in decades, coupled with the pandemic's devastation. More than 300 candidates, including 29 women, are contesting for the country's 50-seat legislative assembly. After the elections, while the Emir of the state will pick the Prime Minister, who is responsible for naming the country's cabinet, Kuwait's nearly $140 billion economy is facing a deficit of $46 billion. Human Rights Watch has condemned a decision by France to shut down a leading anti-racist group. In a statement, the rights body said the move threatens basic human rights and liberties. It said the move risks further stigmatization of Muslims in France. The group offers legal support to Muslims across France in discrimination cases. Islamophobic incidents in France have significantly risen following President Emmanuel Macron's anti-Islam remarks in October. U.S. President Donald Trump has ordered withdrawal of nearly all U.S. troops from Somalia by January 15th. The Defense Department says the move is part of a global pullout of the U.S. forces before Trump's exit. In a statement, Pentagon said some troops would move to neighboring countries, allowing for cross-border operations. It said the move did not reflect a change in U.S. policy, as it remains committed to African partners. Around 700 U.S. troops are stationed in Somalia to assist local forces to battle al-Shabaab and ISIS militants. The U.S. president had already ordered a cut down in troop level in Afghanistan from 4,500 to 2,500. Ethiopia claims to have killed or captured most commanders of rebellious Northern Tigray People's Liberation Front. Ethiopian military says the individuals who executed rebellion are still on the run and hiding. It said the captured or killed personnel also include former federal colonels and generals who fought on the Tigrayan side. But TPLF's local leaders said civilians in Tigray have been protesting against looting by the federal soldiers. Meanwhile, UN's Humanitarian Coordination Office said the fighting is still ongoing in many parts of Tigray. It said the continuing hostilities have complicated efforts to deliver humanitarian aid in the region. Hundreds of people have been killed in fighting between Ethiopian army and Tigray forces since November the 4th. Joe Biden has officially secured enough electors to take charge as the U.S. president. The battleground state of California certified Biden's win, appointing 55 electors pledged for the Democrat. With California's certification, the president-elect's tally of pledged electors reaches 279. Results of Electoral College vote are due to be received and approved by Congress on January the 6th. Meanwhile, President Trump's campaign has filed a lawsuit in Georgia seeking to invalidate election results. In a statement, Trump campaign said the lawsuit will include sworn statements from Georgians alleging fraud. Georgia's Secretary of State and other officials have repeatedly ruled out evidence of widespread fraud in November the 3rd elections. More stories to follow, but right after a short break. Stay tuned. Welcome back. The U.S. has registered a record 225,000 COVID-19 cases overnight, with infections steadily crossing 14.3 million. India's infections have topped 9.6 million, with over 36,000 new cases and 512 deaths in a day. Globally, the virus has claimed 1.5 million lives, while infecting more than 65.8 million people. More in this report.
Nations all across the globe are still striving their best to bend the COVID-19 curve after almost a year, but the measures employed so far simply haven't proven effective. With the coronavirus vaccine deployments, the world is starting to see light at the end of the tunnel. U.S. state health departments are preparing hospitals for first shipment of Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine. Meanwhile, President-elect Joe Biden says vaccination in the U.S. will not be made mandatory. However, Biden also said he may propose hundreds of billions of dollars in coronavirus relief next month.
Congress and President Trump have to get this deal done for the American people. But any package passed in the lame duck session is not going to be enough overall. It's critical, but it's just a start. Congress are going to need to act again in January.
Over in Latin America, public health experts in Brazil warn that an accelerated transmission rate among young people is a major contributor to a surge in cases. Meanwhile, around 1,500 health workers in Chile are taking part in phase 3 clinical trials of the Oxford AstraZeneca vaccine. Mexico is seeing the beginning of end of the pandemic, with the first doses of Pfizer's vaccine expected to be delivered in the next few weeks. With government's orders to cancel year-end travel plans and avoid exchanging Christmas presents, the citizens question how they will be able to feed their families in such situation.
People are not taking the measures to prevent coronavirus, and I think that the government has also not been severe in terms of compliance with the measures. I don't know what the government could do in those cases, but I believe both Mexicans and the government are responsible for the second wave of COVID-19.
In the meantime, spike in COVID-19 cases in South Korea has prompted Seoul's administration to announce unprecedented curfews starting from today.
In Pakistan, 43 more people have lost the battle against COVID-19 over the past 24 hours, which raises the death toll to over 8,300. The health ministry says more than 3,100 people tested positive for the disease overnight. The ministry said the country's COVID-19 active cases have crossed 52,000. It added out of nearly 413,000 countrywide cases, more than 352,000 have recovered so far. The ministry says Sindh province has the highest rate of cases, while crossing 180,000. Punjab has reported over 122,000 coronavirus cases. In the capital Islamabad, nearly 32,000 people have been infected so far. Chinese Foreign Minister Wang Yi has called for united efforts to help African countries deal with the coronavirus pandemic. He made the call at a UN Security Council video conference on cooperation between the world body and the African Union. Africa faces some major challenges acquiring and deploying COVID-19 vaccinations across the continent. There are fears that an insufficient vaccination program could leave the continent isolated. The foreign minister urged the need to broaden Africa's access to crucial medical supplies.
We need to leverage the UN and the WHO's coordinating role in mobilizing global resources to support the African Union's Africa Joint Continental Strategy for COVID-19 outbreak and broaden Africa's access to medical supplies, medicines, therapeutics, technologies, and capital.
China has asked the U.S. to stop politicizing educational exchange programs. Foreign Ministry spokesman Zhao Lijian was responding to Washington's termination of 5 cultural exchange programs with Beijing. Zhao Lijian urged Washington to promote mutual trust and cooperation between the two countries. He criticized U.S. State Department's accusation of calling the programs soft power propaganda tools. Earlier, the U.S. imposed visa sanctions on the officials of the Chinese Communist Party and its United Front Work Department. In a statement, U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo blamed the Communist Party for spreading propaganda. Tensions between Beijing and Washington have soared this year over trade, COVID-19 and Hong Kong. In China, at least 18 people have died in a mine accident caused by excessive carbon monoxide level. State media says 5 people are still trapped underground while 1 has been successfully rescued. The incident occurred at the Dao Shuidong coal mine in southwestern city of Chongqing, trapping 24 people underneath. The mine has been shut for more than 2 months as the company dismantled underground equipment. Dao Shuidong is a high gas mine with annual production capacity of 120,000 tons of coal. The accident marks the second in southwestern municipality in just over 2 months. Pakistan is observing the 49th martyrdom anniversary of Major Muhammad Akram. He embraced martyrdom during the Pakistan-India war in hilly district of East Pakistan in 1971.
Born in 1938 in a small village of Gujarat's district Dinga city, Akram got his early education from TIGRAY Middle School. Later, he joined the military college Jhelum and got commissioned in the 4th Frontier Force Regiment of Pakistan's Army on the 13th of October 1963. Akram maintained a good service record and was promoted as major in September 1970. During the 1971 war, he was commanding the 4th Frontier Force Regiment in Hilly District. He repulsed every attack, inflicting heavy casualties on the enemy. During the battle, he received a burst of fire in the chest and embraced martyrdom on the 5th of December 1971. Due to his supreme sacrifice, the government of Pakistan awarded him the highest military gallantry award of Nishan-e-Haider. To pay homage to the brave son of soil, a wreath-laying ceremony was held at the monument of the martyred in Jhelum. Army Chief General Qamar Javed Bajwa pays tribute to Major Muhammad Akram for his supreme sacrifice. A floral wreath was laid on behalf of General Bajwa at the monument.
Venezuela is set to hold parliamentary elections on Sunday. The vote is viewed by many as a fraudulent effort by ruling Socialist Party to take charge of the parliament. The country's opposition, led by Juan Guaido, has already boycotted the elections on grounds of fraud. But the ruling coalition argued that electoral conditions were the same as in 2015 when the opposition won control of National Assembly. President Nicolas Maduro and his allies are expected to win a majority, strengthening their grip on power.
I believe in the people. I trust the people. So I said to the opposition, opposition, you go into the streets to attack me, to lie and say ridiculous things. I accept your challenge. So on Sunday, we are going to a referendum. If you win, I leave the presidency.
Protests flared up as mine workers and a growing group of farm workers blocked highways across Peru. The demonstrations have amped up pressure on newly appointed interim president Francisco Sagasti. Hundreds of mine workers demanded the government to overturn management of the mining complex. Meanwhile, the farm workers protested the Congress's plan to debate repeal of agrarian promotion law. They termed the legislature's move as unjust. The blockade of highways left hundreds of buses and tractor-trailer trucks stranded, including one protester dead. President Sagasti has pledged to update the existing laws but not replace them entirely. At least 14 people have died and 26 others are injured in a bus crash in Brazil. The incident occurred as a bus carrying 40 passengers fell from an overpass in the state of Minas Gerais. The civil police of Minas Gerais said 11 people died on the spot and 3 others at a hospital. Emergency services rushed to the scene and moved the injured to the hospital for medical treatment. The bus owner said the vehicle was carrying tourists. Initial reports show a mechanical failure caused the deadly crash. The US has reported a rise of 2.8% in sales of military equipment to other countries. The State Department says weapons exports amounted to $175 billion in 2020 fiscal year compared to $170 billion last year. It's the direct sales by the US companies rose by 8.4% to $124.3 billion in 2020 from $114.7 billion in 2019. But sales brokered by the US government fell 8.3% to $50.78 billion from $55.39 billion last year. Japan's purchase of Lockheed Martin's F-35 amounting to $23 billion stands out among major deals. On average, foreign military sales under Trump amounted to $57.5 billion per year versus $53.9 billion during Obama's 8-year tenure. The US government has carried out the safe implosion of a 1,000-foot high stack in Stevenson, Alabama. The explosion is part of the ongoing Widows Creek fossil plant demolition project. The US government's Tennessee Valley Authority processed the concrete and steel that formed the stack. It said this will allow to reuse the concrete and recycle the steel. The plant site is being prepared for economic redevelopment. The environmental remediation program for the plant site is expected to cost about $66 million. In the US, strong winds combined with the low humidity threatened to stoke wildfire in Southern Californian canyon. Firefighters have managed to contain only 10% of the fire so far. The blaze, termed bonfire, has forced 25,000 people to flee as it rapidly engulfed much of Silverado Canyon. The fire has so far scorched around 6,400 acres of the inland portion of Orange County. The National Weather Service has issued a red flag warning for gusty winds in the county. Wildfires have scorched over 17,000 square kilometers of California land since the start of the year. In India, heavy rains from cyclone BUREVI have caused severe waterlogging in coastal cities. The cyclone has weakened into a depression over the Gulf of Mannar with the associated wind speed of 50 kilometers per hour. Rainwater caused drains to overflow, causing water to enter homes in Puducherry and southern Ramasavaram cities. Roads and streets were inundated and power supply remained disrupted in several places. People in low-lying areas were being shifted to relief centers and the cyclone shelters. Kerala Disaster Management Authority has issued an orange alert for state's 4 districts from tomorrow. More stories to follow, but right after a short break, stay tuned. Welcome back. Archaeologists in Thailand have unearthed a rare, partially fossilized whale skeleton. The prehistoric skeleton is believed to be about 5,000 years old. More in this report.
The excavation for the discovery of an ancient whale skeleton had been going on for about a month in Bangkok. Earlier in November, the 12.5-meter-long skeleton was discovered by a cyclist who spotted part of a large vertebrae coming out of the ground in an area 12 kilometers away from the sea. Researchers believe the skeleton is the only discovery of its kind in the continent.
This whale skeleton is currently thought to be the only one in Asia. It's very rare for us to find such a discovery in near perfect condition. Yesterday we found the right shoulder and fin, which added to what we already have. So we have managed to recover about 90% of the whale.
The team is piecing together the skull and filling up cracks at the site before it is transported to the laboratory for cleaning and preservation. Once this is finished, the fragile skeleton will be exhibited. The bones had to be carbon dated in order to determine the exact age of the skeleton. However, the gender of the whale is not yet known.
We found about 36 backbone pieces which stretched from the tail section to the neck. The tail end was quite damaged before the discovery. We also found the left shoulder and its fin, including 25 ribcage pieces and the skull.
Scientists are hoping the skeleton will provide more information to aid research into Bride's whales as well as the geological conditions at the time.
Renowned German pianist Igor Levit has staged a musical protest against the chopping of trees in Dennenrode forest. The pianist took his instrument to the woods and performed a song in support of environmental activists. More in this report.
Voicing support for the environment and against deforestation, famous pianist Igor Levit recorded his protest against the extension of the A49 highway. The new project is set to cut through Dannenrode forest in Germany. The acclaimed singer sits down at his piano set up in the middle of the woods and plays the Irish song Danny Boy.
Auch wenn der Anlass sehr traurig ist und ich habe gerade
Even though the occasion is very sad, and just now during the rehearsal I had the feeling of playing some sort of swan song for something that leaves us, I am still thankful, happy and content to be here with you.
Dozens of police officers have been deployed to the Dannenrode forest to protect the workers and to remove the activists who have built tree houses and erected barricades in the area to try to prevent the felling. Dannenrode forest is also referred to as Danny. Levit also portrayed a poster on the back of his piano reading Danny Stays in German.
What is happening here is quickly reduced to a conflict between activists and the police. But ultimately, this is an attempt to defend and protect ecosystems and our livelihood so that we can survive. It has something almost deeply political to it.
Green activists in Frankfurt have lately been concerned about the felling of trees in the forest that began on the 1st of October.
The UK and the European Union will seek to break the stalemate over a post-Brexit trade deal today. This comes after talks to reach a deal paused as the UK and the EU negotiators say significant divergences remain. Prime Minister Boris Johnson and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen are meeting to break this deadlock. Negotiators Michel Barnier and David Frost said conditions for a deal between the two sides have not been met. State aid, subsidies, fishing and enforcement of new rules remain the key sticking points in negotiations. If a deal is not agreed by the 31st of December, the two sides will follow the World Trade Organization rules. Earlier, Boris Johnson's spokesman said the government was committed to working hard to try and reach an agreement. In the English Premier League, Everton and Burnley have played a 1-1 draw at Turf Moor. Burnley made a lightning start with a goal in the 3rd minute by Robbie Brady, but Dominic Calvert-Lewin scored an equaliser just before the break to push Everton to the 7th spot on the table. Both the sides had chances to win, only for goalkeepers Jordan Pickford and Nick Pope to shine in front of England manager Gareth Southgate for their performance. Burnley remains in the relegation zone with just 6 points from 10 games. FIFA has named Japan as the host nation for next year's Club World Cup with an undisclosed date during the winter. Japan is the 8th-time Club World Cup host, with the last being in 2016. Last year, FIFA said the Confederations Cup would be abolished for an enlarged Club World Cup. China was due to host the expanded tournament, but play was postponed due to the coronavirus pandemic. Qatar is set to host the 2020 edition in February. The original date for the Club World Cup was December, but FIFA had to pick another date amid the pandemic. In motorsports Formula One race, Mercedes' George Russell completes a clean sweep 2 practice sessions at the Sakir Grand Prix. Russell is Lewis Hamilton's late stand-in after he tested positive for COVID-19. Russell beat Red Bull's Max Verstappen by a fraction of a second, while teammate Valtteri Bottas finished 11th. Bottas set the fastest lap of the session but had the time deleted for exceeding track limits. Racing Point Sergio Perez was third ahead of Renault's Esteban Ocon. Hamilton is leading the drivers, standing 131 points ahead of teammate Bottas. Russian aerial athletes ran away with the opener of the FIS Freestyle Ski World Cup in Finland. The Russians easily claimed the men's category while also taking third in the women's competition. Maxim Burlov beat out a Russian compatriot Pavel Korotov and older brother Ilya Burov to top the podium, while Australia's Laura Peel beat Emma Weiss of Germany and Russia's Anastasia Peretkova to claim the opener. The delayed season was short on spectators due to COVID-19 restrictions, but it didn't limit the skill and acrobatics. And now the weather situation from around the globe. And that's all for now. With the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News.